The Portland housing market is crashing in reverse. Today we're going to look at where it's heading in 2025, and we're talking about trends that no other Portland realtors are talking about. So this is a new place for me. We are about to start a brand new year on this channel. If you're watching and you're new here, I am Tim Jackson. I'm a licensed Oregon and Washington real estate agent, and this is the brand new studio that I am building. This is going to be an amazing place where you're going to see a lot more content coming from in 2025. We're only about 30% done right now, so it's still definitely a work in progress, but I thought, hey, we're going to do a end of the year market review. I only do these once a year. We're going to also celebrate a little bit. There's some sad news, so we need some whiskey, but we're going to celebrate with a cigar. We're going to do our uppers with our downers because you're going to hear some exciting things. There's some depressing data in here, and so we're just going to do both. We're going to have a good time. Stay tuned to the end because there is so much cool info in here, and definitely subscribe to stay along for the journey in 2025. The real estate market has been through a lot since 2020. So we're going to talk about some of the building blocks that led to the housing storm that we are currently in. Here we see supply, which was already historically low before COVID, was then hit by interest rates, which dropped in 2020, which then on the back end started inflation. We're going to see how these all set each other off. So you can see that's the crashing reason that people are out of the housing market and unable to afford a home. I'm gonna need to pour a drink for that one. In fact, even before COVID hit, Portland was really at the eye of the housing storm due to our very tough zoning laws when it comes to farmland, our expensive permitting fees, and our very high demand over the last decade. Portland was really in a pinch when it came to housing. But recently, demand seems to have gone really through the floor. We are seeing 33% less transactions than we were seeing in the healthier markets of 2015 to 2019. And this is comparing to like pre-2020. What's more is that Portland only saw a surplus of 400 people between 2022 to 2023, whereas suburbs like Vancouver saw massive spikes relatively. Like we're talking 6,500 people were added to Vancouver in 2023. So our suburbs are growing, but Portland has seen a very different landscape just over the last couple years. But the crazy part is, with this massive supply issue, Portland is still pulling back from new construction. Portland is expected to build less homes in 2025 than in 2024. And actually for the years subsequent, Portland is expected to scale back their buildings by quite a bit. And this isn't because of the fall off from demand. Portland still has a very low supply of housing. So when I say that we're crashing in reverse, I'm looking at historic graphs that show us where we came from is gonna lead to where we're about to head. Look at this historic chart of building supply first. Notice that after the crash in 2008, we were building significantly less homes nationwide for over a decade. In 2013, it completely bottomed out at just 800,000 homes built, and we only just caught up to the average of what we're kind of expected to build just to keep up a couple years ago, and we're pulling back from that. So this is just one of those blocks that's leading to where we're about to go. Let's now follow the history of interest rates. You can see that we just came back from a historic, not just over the last 5 years low, but we're talking a decade's low interest rate, and we're coming up to about what's average. So not only are we coming on the back end of historic underbuilding, we're also coming back from a historically low interest rate. And this lack of supply and low interest rates have locked people into their current housing situation. So now let's look at how this actually affects the housing prices and look at the history of housing prices. It takes a really discerning eye to read these charts because sometimes you'll see data where they'll just throw up one chart and say this is where the market's heading. But you really need to look at the historic lines of where are things going to go, and then also look at the years that we skipped where we should have been. It's leading to this pent-up demand that we saw, and now it's leading into a kind of drawn out stagnation where buyers can't afford and sellers aren't really selling. And admittedly, buyers and renters that haven't yet got a home are always looking at the data with their own, tinted glasses. And admittedly, realtors do the same thing. They will tell you that the data is all glossy and it's good to go, but really neither of those pictures are genuinely true. The sky is not gonna fall, and housing prices aren't just gonna keep going up to an infinite no end. And of the 5 powerhouse groups that are predicting national home prices going up in 2025, they all say between 2 to 5%. The National Association of Realtors leads the pack, saying that housing prices are going to go up by 5% next year. Now, the NAR is a little bit of a mafia group that has all the power, and they want to dictate the facts by giving you the most cushy ones. I don't think prices are going to go up that much, but I do think that prices will continue to see an upward trajectory because of what we're about to talk about next. Now, if you are looking into the Portland or Vancouver area next year, I just want to give you a quick reminder that I have a headhunters list down below. So definitely sign up for that to get your ideal housing search, because really of all these predictions, nobody can really predict better than just buying and letting the long-term effects of real estate go to your advantage. And this is the key info that people are missing. And this is the one thing that a lot of folks aren't talking about. And it is that shelter prices have not been reined in by inflation like we think. Now, inflation has made a lot of things more expensive, from grocery prices to eating out to insurance, which has just gone through the roof. Housing has similarly not been reined in by inflation, and it's actually locked in these historically high housing prices. And this is actually one reason that we aren't expected to see interest rates drop below 5% until at least 2030. And that's because there really needs to be a reining in, a cooling down, and a kind of a blowing off of the steam of the last few years of housing prices so that the average home can be affordable to the average home buyer. We're going to talk about the elephant in the room, and it is not my dog Trolley. It is the fact that Trump was elected, and I'm going to look back at 2019 when Trump was in office, and he was pressuring Jay Powell to decrease interest rates. Now remember, we weren't in a global pandemic then, and he was doing this to boost the economy, so that by 2020, when we actually needed the rates to drop, So by 2020, when the rates were actually needed to be pulled down, we were already so low that rates just got dragged to a point that it was not only throwing a match on the fire, we had this huge stack of tinder with a bunch of gasoline poured on it, and then a flamethrower came out to make sure that we got a very hot bonfire going in the housing market. So while a lot of people will blame Bidenomics and the last 4 years as the reason our economy is derailed, just putting my nonpartisan, bipartisan hat on, I really think we need to look back to where interest rates were before even COVID to get a good idea of where we're going. The one thing that people aren't really talking about though is that Trump actually could put pressure on the feds again to bring rates down. And if rates go down below 5%, I actually don't think good things will happen. We will see another flamethrower on a burning pile of tinder that's already kind of smoldered. So I think we really should keep rates above 5% so that we can keep housing prices in control. And speaking of scenarios that other people just aren't talking about, is that hyperinflation could become a very real thing in our economy. Hyperinflation is something that has historically really helped out farmers and people that own real estate, while it's hurt renters and people that work for the government. That's because the first class, they own the asset, while the second is tied to the asset. But I really think hyperinflation and Trump dropping rates below 5% are really not a huge likelihood. I just think we really should look at all the different scenarios, because analysts are always talking about what will happen with so much confidence. Yet nobody predicted the 2008 housing crash. Nobody predicted the feverish COVID economy. That's why I bring multiple scenarios to you, and that way you can be prepared for anything that comes your way. It's like looking out at the battlefield and being able to predict the next movement from not only the enemy, but also looking at where you're heading, seeing who's going to flank, and seeing just the different ways that the scenario could play out. It's how I like to advise my clients in being on top, To be quite frank, diversifying and having different avenues of both income and diversifying where you're going into really helps weather through any storm that could come our way. Real estate is just one bucket, and I really believe that if you're not in the stock market and even something like crypto or an alternative asset, it's a great way to stay afloat in uncertain times. And here's one thing that I will say that's going to happen in 2025 is that rental prices are going to continue slowing down and dropping down. Right now in the Portland market, a 3-bedroom rental unit is going for just under $2,000. So I wouldn't be getting into investment properties in the Portland area. And if you're trying to make money on real estate as an investment opportunity, really the way that I'm making a lot of my clients money is that they're paying cash for off-market opportunities, and then they're flipping them, and then they're selling them for a profit. But it's really purchasing on the equity rather than selling where you're going to make your money in this upcoming market. Airbnbs and long-term rentals are probably not a great entry point right now unless you can enter at a very good price. Now, I still think owning your own property to hedge against inflation and to be able to control what you're paying for your shelter on a fixed rate mortgage is really going to be what's going to set you apart. And here's a story that I think could help highlight how I think we really have it good here in America. My wife and I were in Japan last year, and we were in the back of an Uber heading to one of those cool Japanese car meets. With us in the Uber were an Australian couple. Their interests are variable rate and controlled directly by the government. So anyways, as we were heading towards this car meet, one of the Australians said like, oh crap, as they were looking at their phone. They realized that their variable rate interest rate had climbed so fast, they were gonna go from a 3% to a 7% interest rate on a home that they were already stuck with and they already owned and they could do nothing about. So at least buying a home in Oregon or Washington or really any state in the United States is you can control that interest rate and know exactly what you're getting into through your closing disclosure. And that way, when you make an offer on a home, you're basically going to know your exact payment down to $1. And while inflation is going to slowly increase the price that somebody pays for rent, your mortgage payment is going to stay the same for that 30 years. The unfortunate reality is that the rich are going to continue to get richer. Housing prices are going to continue to get less affordable. There's not really any indicators to show that there's going to be a 30% drop, a 40% or 50% drop in housing prices. Everybody in the headlines and everybody is saying that you have to be stuck in a perpetual situation. You don't always have to be stuck renting. You don't always have to be stuck with where you're at. Don't let fear drive you. Start the conversation and we can chat about where you can head in the next year. Now, Portland is also going to be a market of a lot more single folks coming in. That's what the data is showing. And recently there was just an article about how the average first-time homebuyer's age has increased to a historic high of 38 years old. Which means there's a lot less younger people, millennials like myself, that are purchasing a home. I just bought my second home in 2023 when a lot of the headlines were saying not to purchase. And that's because I really think housing is going to continue to be a great hedge against inflation. I'm super happy for what's happened in 2024. I'm glad that I've helped so many viewers like you get into a home despite what the media is saying and telling you not to own and to say that you're always going to be renting. Trust me when I say it takes hard work. It takes research. I am definitely here for you. There's a lot more market insight that I can share with you over coffee. Heck, I've got to have this full cigar bar ready to go. We're going to have a speakeasy going in my own house. So if you want to talk about this stuff and go over your personal plan to get ahead and beat inflation, I'm here for you. Just reach down below, subscribe for more videos coming up in 2025, and watch this video next. I'll see you next week.